July 1945. After the defeat of Nazi Germany within Europe, the Pacific War rages on. 4 years prior, the Japanese, in an attempt to weaken the war efforts of the Americans, destroyed Pearl Harbor, a naval base during World War II. And now America is faced with a decision that would later change the face of human existence as we know it. Invade Japan with the risk of mass loss of American troops, or drop the atom bomb? The failed firebombings of Japan and subsequent dropping of the atom bomb were decisions made by Harry Truman, the President of the United States at the time. Truman was one of the heads of state to attend the Potsdam Conference, a meeting of the Allied forces during World War II, to demand the unconditional surrender of the Japanese. In an interview with reporters, Japanese Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki stated that no formal decision from the government had been reached in regards to the Potsdam Declaration. He simply stated no comment, a move that would later trigger the events leading to the dropping of the atomic bomb. This is due to the use of the phrase mokusatsu within the articles featuring the interview. Mokusatsu is composed of two kanji characters, moku meaning silence and satsu meaning killing. When put together, it simply means to ignore or treat with silent contempt. Misinterpreted by the US as killing with silent contempt, the US decided to put their plans into action and ready the use of the atomic bomb, an experimental weapon and the first weapon of mass destruction. Truman decided that the use of the atomic bomb would minimize US troop casualties that an invasion of Japan would cause. And, on the 6th of August 1945, the American Air Force would drop the first atomic bomb on the military and industrial town of Hiroshima, and 3 days later on the town of Nagasaki. And within 45 seconds of the bomb leaving the plane, it impacted onto the unknowing town below, killing tens of thousands instantly in the flash, and many more later due to fires, smoke inhalation, radiation sickness, and even necrosis. The loss of lives as well as the end of the monarchical reign caused a destabilization of the meta-narrative within Japanese society. What was life to be like now the emperors are no more? Would Japan survive the occupation? Where did they go from there? Article 21 of the 1947 Constitution of Japan, a series of laws implemented by the Americans, censored all subversive political ideas within media, resulting in many reflections of the life of Japanese people during this time to be muted and forced into publication in the years following the occupation. These reflections manifested themselves within manga, and this essay will examine its place within Shonen, or manga targeted towards young boys and men. Manga is the hugely popular medium of Japanese comic books, with 2016 seeing £3.11 billion worth sold in Japan alone. For this essay, I will be analysing purely fictional fantasy manga storylines, so non-fictional manga such as Barefoot Gen will be put aside. And, for representation's sake, I will be using the anime adaptations for the respective manga for background visuals, as they're more eye-catching. The discussion of the atom bomb within manga has polarised the industry for decades, with some stating that horror should be kept away from manga readers trying to escape, whilst others argue it's a part of Japan's modern history that should not be forgotten. And with more than 76% of Japan's population being born post-World War II, the war is not something within the collective consciousness of Japanese society. An author or mangaka whom is said to be the godfather of manga and one of the first to tackle post-war Japan within his works is Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka grew up during World War II in Osaka, one of the many targets of US firebombing, as discussed in his biographical manga, The Osamu Tezuka Story. Tezuka is perhaps best known for his serialized manga and global icon Astro Boy. First debuted in 1951, Astro Boy features the titular hero, a robot made by a scientist to replace his late son, utilising atomic energy to power the boy. And whilst this use of atomic energy may be a little on the nose, the true beauty comes within Tezuka's symbolism of the atom bomb, and how it changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of Japanese. For example, through the tragic story of alcoholism and grieving by Dr. Tenma, Astro's creator, we see a reflection of the broken spirits of the troops and citizens of Japan post-surrender.
Why, you little...
I'm very sorry, Dad.
You're not my son. Don't call me Dad. You're a robot. Get out.
Tenma could be a representation of those longing to reconnect with loved ones lost in the conflict, or soothing orphaned youth with the idea that they've not been forgotten. Using Professor Ochanomizu, Astro's surrogate father, to be a paternal figure for his readers who maybe don't have a father figure in their lives. This could also be seen as Tezuka extending his understanding of the fear and pain of loss gained through his first-hand experiences with World War II. Tezuka's never shied away from making his views apparent within Astro Boy, despite the pain and anguish felt by the public at the time. He dreamed of a world where atomic energy could be used to benefit the lives of those around them, to give and to not take away. Astro Boy is a hero, saving the Earth from tyrants and annihilation, and most importantly, doing so utilising a technology that left Japan in ruin. Astro Boy is comprised of parts described in The Greatest Robot on Earth to be containing an atomic engine, the source of all of Astro Boy's power. Astro in 1970 became the face of one of Japan's campaign flyers for the use of atomic energy within the country, despite not licensing the character from Tezuka. The pamphlet circulated amongst schools, educating children on the energy source in the hopes to convince parents and relatives that despite the pain that the weaponized atomic energy had caused Japan, it still had a use that could benefit the people. This proved successful, as up until 2011, 30% of all Japan's power was produced from nuclear power plants and was due to increase further in the future. However, this eventually was thwarted by campaigners anxious about the events of the Fukushima power plant. Hideaki Anno's masterpiece Neon Genesis Evangelion was released as a manga a year before it was an anime. The manga was originally intended to be a piece of promotional material for the release of the show a year later, but finished serialization in 2013. And whilst the characters and premise remain somewhat the same, the manga's universe has expanded in comparison to the show. In my opinion, Neon Genesis Evangelion is a perfect metaphor for Japan during World War II, the dropping of the atom bombs, and the emotional trauma experienced by all those swept up in them. Neon Genesis Evangelion is a story following a group of teenagers whom are asked to fight in mechas called Evas to save humanity from a third impact, a huge, axis-altering explosion caused by beasts called angels. The previous two impacts destroyed Tokyo twice, forcing rebuilding and relocation. We're placed into Tokyo 3, a city built to sink below the Earth's surface level, next to the haunting ruins of Tokyo 2. Shinji Ikari, the protagonist, is a sensitive boy who is thrusted into a world of combat to gain the approval of his father and director of NERV, Earth's Angel Combat Force, Gendo Ikari. Along the way, Shinji faces internal struggle and moral dilemma as he questions why he continues to fight the angels, at what cost, and why he even exists. The show sees all major characters undergo some form of identity change or even a complete loss of identity as an effect of the war. Shinji loses sense of who he is, as seen often throughout Shinji's inner monologue, even within the first chapter. Asuka uses the abuse and loss of her mother to spur her on to be a better pilot. And Rei never knows whom she really is, being one of many expendable clones. And this only seems to worsen with prolonged conflict, with Shinji often spiralling into depressive episodes and PTSD. Asuka's sweet demeanour turns into resentment and furious determination, and Rei's numbness and lack of emotion, a highly debated subject amongst fans, that I believe to be an effect of emotional trauma. These are all children whom Anno described as sick in an interview when discussing his disbelief surrounding the popularity of Evangelion's characters. Neon Genesis also explores post-war cities of Japan, or in this case, post-impact Japan. We see in a few chapters the previous Tokyo reduced to rubble. All signs of civilization are gone, and seldom do we ever see any of the general public on the streets. It's mostly abandoned, and half of it has sunken below the sea, an effect of rising sea levels when the meteorites containing the angels Adam and Lilith struck and melted the Antarcticas, known as the first and second impacts. A bit more digging within the lore tells us that old Tokyo was levelled by a WMD, or weapon of mass destruction, to try and wipe out the angels. The atomic bomb is also classified under the WMD umbrella. And not to mention N2 mines, a weapon developed by NERV that looks and functions exactly like the atomic bomb. It produces mushroom clouds, blinding light, and creates craters around the area of impact. They're used pretty recklessly throughout the manga, and yet they never seem to solve the problem and save the day alone. Instead, it's the cooperation between pilots, the control room staff, and the use of Avas to defeat the angels. Ross Islam, a Stanford University graduate, stated in an essay that one interpretation is that human might is more powerful than nuclear weaponry, an uplifting idea in light of the helplessness felt in Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the war. And I agree with Russ. It's an idea that a Japan recovering from such tragedy needed, the idea that a human spirit conquers all adversity. When mentioning Japanese media that captures the atomic anxiety of Japan, it's impossible not to mention Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira. Akira is an epic serialized from 1982 to 1990. Set in Neo-Tokyo in the year 2030, just 38 years after an experimental bomb was dropped on Tokyo during World War III, we see a Japan in despair, students rioting against a corrupt militarized government, and a strong sense of rich and poor class division. We're immediately introduced to a young biker gang who race to the crater where the bomb that leveled metropolitan Japan had impacted. This immediately allows us to see the gravity of the situation and how the physical scar of World War III still remains, setting up the premise that the mental and emotional scarring still remains too. The gang contains Tetsuo and Kaneda, our antagonist and one of the many protagonists respectively. We're quickly told that the two were raised together in an orphanage, and in a race with rival biker gang the Clowns, Tetsuo crashes into Takashi, a young boy whom is one of 3 ESPers, someone with extrasensory perception. The crash causes the government to monitor and experiment on Tetsuo, causing him too to develop psychic powers. Psychic powers that allow him to attack those whom have ever wronged him, causing him to lead the rival biker gang to spite Kaneda and clash with the government for making him suffer at the hand of their experiments. Tetsuo, through his growing powers, awakens Akira, a small child with unlimited psychic power and the destroyer of old Tokyo. The government and the rebels battle over custody of Akira, each with different intentions of the use of his power, resulting in one of the SPers Akira grew up with being shot, thus causing Akira to destroy Tokyo yet again. Tetsuo and Akira team up to form the Great Tokyo Empire, a traditional zealous faction that celebrates their psychic strength, comparable to Japan during the reign of the emperors. In an effort to demonstrate his power, Tetsuo pushes his body too far and begins to mutate uncontrollably, engulfing his surroundings before exploding into a giant ball of energy. Akira cancels out this explosion by using his powers to trigger a similar explosion of energy, destroying Tetsuo. The citizens flee from the explosions, and the final frames of the manga capture Kaneda and the band of heroes returning to Neo-Tokyo to rebuild civilization once more. The manga explores the perseverance of the Japanese people within the world of Akira, with the story beginning with a Tokyo that has recently survived a war. This is briefly touched upon, stated to be due to the use of WMDs to stop Akira's explosive power from destroying the wider Japan. And despite this only happening recently, people adapt to the hardships that the destruction of old Tokyo brings via a cultural upheaval, pursuing criminality to survive, rebelling against governments in an effort to increase the quality of life, or sheltering yourself from such acts by blending into the higher classes of society. The inhabitants of Neo-Tokyo adapt to face the adversity that World War III brought them, which in and of itself is a telling of how Japan experienced the market boom post-World War II due to them repurposing their market as an electronic supplier to the world. The manga ends in a similar way to its beginning, the levelling of Neo-Tokyo due to Tetsuo's halted by a counter-explosion by Akira, leaving Kaneda K and the surviving members of the biker gang to travel back into the ruins and begin anew. This ability to bounce back despite the constant destruction of Tokyo could be a reflection of the Japanese people pushing on to survive, despite the firebombings and the dropping of the atom bomb in Japan. And the climax of the manga is the most telling depiction of this, with Akira, an unstoppable energy that makes up all things, quite literally atoms, being used to destroy Tokyo, causing people to evacuate and return when it is safe, much like the towns of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The representation of youth surviving World War III within Akira is a big part of what makes the conflict between Tetsuo and Kaneda so great. 2 orphans who grew up together, turn to a life of crime, and fight for power every day of their lives. Not to mention the fact that all representations of youth within Akira are orphaned, even the ESPers. And, much like the adults, the children and teens of Neo-Tokyo have had to adapt to this new life in this dystopian society. The biker gang are a group of boys who turn to criminality as an emotional coping mechanism, beating up those who threaten progress of a repairing Tokyo. In this case, the oppressive government, and the clown gang. In real life, this translates to the Americans who occupied their homeland in the 40s. The biker gang is seen to be unemployed aside from their criminal lifestyle, making them the embodiment of disengaged youth caused by the displacement of people after World War II, or within this case, World War III. Within manga we can see many interesting representations and metaphorizations of the atom bomb, and I feel I'm only scratching the surface here, with many more manga tackling themes such as the expendability of life, death and mourning, and imperialism, and many more genres to divulge within. However, it's undeniable how shonen manga has been a key medium within the discussion of the atom bomb within Japan, both as a coping mechanism for its readers and mangaka, but also as a piece of history, forever preserved in a page for native and foreign readers alike to explore and learn from. And with manga being a booming market and face of Japanese culture, it's an idea that will hopefully become even more prevalent within fictional works. Thank you for watching.